When you stop breathing, I'll dance on your grave, Marcus. That voice whispered in the darkness, soft but sharp like a knife. Chicago's fanciest hospital was quiet, real quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. In the hospital room, machines beeped. A breathing tube kept the rhythm steady. Green lights blinked on the monitor, tracking a heartbeat. Elena sat next to the bed. Her face looked perfect, even in the dim light. She held her husband's hand. But not because she cared. She held it so he couldn't fight back. Marcus, the most powerful gang leader in Chicago, just laid there. Machines keeping him alive. At least that's what Elena thought. 10 years, she whispered, her voice full of anger from 1,000 lonely nights. 10 years I lived like a decoration in your big mansion. 10 years I smiled for cameras and played the perfect wife while you treated me like I was invisible. She leaned closer, her lips almost touching Marcus's ear. You know what it feels like, living in someone's shadow. People only know Marcus. Nobody sees Elena. Nobody cares. The breathing machine kept going. Beep, beep. Beep. Marcus didn't move, like a statue. But now things are different. Elena smiled. A real smile for the first time in years. I found someone who actually sees me. A man who treats me like a person, not a trophy. She stood up, fixing her hair. The plan's almost done, Marcus. When you're gone, I'll be free. I'll have everything you owned, and you. You'll be nothing but a name on a stone. What Elena didn't know, Marcus heard everything, every single word. Every breath, every poisonous sentence from the wife he trusted for 10 years. Inside that frozen body, Marcus's mind was totally awake. He couldn't open his eyes, couldn't move, couldn't scream, but he heard it all, and every word Elena said felt like a knife stabbing his chest. A man who truly understands me. Those words burned into Marcus's brain like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. So there was someone else. How long, since when, he'd trusted her. In a world full of lies and violence, Marcus always believed he had one safe place. One person he could trust. Elena was his wife, his family. Turns out, the most dangerous enemy wasn't the rival gangs. The most dangerous enemy had been sleeping next to him every night for 10 years. Marcus's finger twitched. Just a tiny movement, almost impossible to see. Nobody noticed. Elena had turned around, checking her phone. She typed a quick message, probably to that man who truly understood her. Then she put the phone in her purse. Right then, footsteps echoed in the hallway. A nurse walked past the room. Like flipping a switch, Elena changed completely. Her shoulders dropped. Her eyes turned red like she'd been crying for hours. That cold voice disappeared. Now she sounded broken and sad. Oh, Marcus, she sobbed, pressing her husband's hand to her cheek. Please wake up. I need you. I can't live without you. The nurse stopped at the door, looking in with sad eyes. She saw a wife destroyed by her husband's condition. She saw love and pain. She didn't see the devil wearing a human face that Marcus just discovered. When the nurse left, Elena dropped Marcus's hand like it was trash. She grabbed a tissue and dabbed her eyes, but there weren't any real tears. Acting is exhausting, she muttered. But it won't be much longer. She picked up her purse and walked to the door. Before leaving, she looked back at Marcus one last time. Sleep well, my dear husband. I hope this is your last sleep. The door clicked shut. The room went silent again. And in that darkness, Marcus laid there, motionless, but his mind was screaming. He couldn't cry, couldn't yell, couldn't do anything. But he made a promise to himself in the most painful moment of his life. He wouldn't die. Not today, not like this. And when he woke up, the most dangerous man in Chicago would show her what real betrayal looks like. But first, he needed to know more, hear more. His silence would become his deadliest weapon. The most powerful man in Chicago just realized his biggest enemy had shared his bed for 10 years. 48 hours before those poison words floated through the hospital room, Marcus was driving through Chicago's rain. That night, the city looked drowned under sheets of water. Rain slammed the windshield like tiny bullets. Marcus just left a meeting at a warehouse on the south side. He'd been talking with his partners about growing the business. The meeting ran late. Now it was almost midnight. He was alone in his fancy SUV. No driver. He'd refused the usual pickup. Sometimes Marcus needed moments like this, alone, quiet, time to think without anybody bothering him. Rain poured, roads were empty. His mind wandered through the years. People called him a gang boss, the most dangerous man in Chicago. A ghost of the criminal world, but Marcus knew who he really was. He grew up on the poor West Side. His childhood was thin meals and gunfire every night. He built his empire from nothing, but he never forgot where he started. Unlike other criminals, Marcus had rules. He never dealt drugs. That poison killed his mom when he was 12. He never hurt regular people, innocent folks who had nothing to do with the criminal games. And he always protected the neighborhood where he grew up. Made it the safest place in Chicago, even though police never bothered going there. Some people said Marcus was ruthless. Some said he was a hero to forgotten people. The truth was somewhere in between, and Marcus didn't care to explain. The car turned onto an empty road near the factory district, a shortcut Marcus often used to avoid nosy eyes. On both sides stood abandoned factories, brick walls stained and peeling, windows shattered like empty eyes. Street lights flickered in the rain, throwing light and shadow like a horror movie. Marcus frowned when a lamp ahead went dark. Then bright again, then dark. He slowed down a little. Years in the criminal world taught him to stay alert. But he wasn't fast enough. A truck burst from the intersection like a monster from the dark. No headlights. No horn, no brakes. Marcus only saw that huge chunk of metal for a split second before everything exploded. Metal screamed against metal. Glass shattered like frozen tears. Time broke into 1,000 pieces. Marcus's SUV flew sideways, spinning twice before slamming into a light pole. The airbags exploded, but they weren't enough to stop his head from cracking into the steering wheel. Blood ran down his forehead. Hot and slick, the world spun, then sank into darkness. When people reached the crash scene, they found a fancy car twisted beyond recognition. Inside, Marcus laid there, motionless, face covered in blood, breathing faint, but the weird part, the truck that caused the crash was gone. No trace, no driver, no license plate, like it never existed. Was it an accident or a carefully planned murder? That question would haunt many people in the days ahead. News spread faster than fire in that rainy night. Marcus, the untouchable, has fallen. Chicago's criminal world shook. Phones rang in dark rooms. Secret meetings were called. Marcus's enemies smiled in the shadows. His allies held their breath and waited. An empire was wobbling, and vultures had already started circling above Chicago's sky. But nobody knew Marcus wasn't dead. And inside that frozen body, a new war was about to begin. Ryan was deep asleep when the phone rang, ripping the night open. 2 a.m. James's number glowed on the screen. The man in charge of Marcus's security. Ryan knew immediately something was wrong. James never called this late unless something serious happened. Your brother's been in an accident. They're bringing him to St. Mary's now. It's bad. The words hit Ryan like ice water dumped on his chest. His blood seemed to freeze. His heart stopped for a few seconds. Marcus, his brother, the man he looked up to more than anyone in the world. The one who raised him after their parents died. The one who taught him everything about life in the criminal world. Ryan threw himself out of bed, pulling on clothes while gripping the phone. He ran to the garage, jumped in the car, and hit the gas like racing death itself. On the way to the hospital, he made call after call. Get all the men. Increase security at every business. Lock down information until further orders. Ryan might only be the younger brother, the right-hand man. But while Marcus couldn't act, Ryan would stand up and carry everything. When Ryan reached St. Mary's Hospital, the scene left him stunned. Reporters everywhere packed the entrance, camera flashes popping nonstop like lightning in the dark. News of Marcus's crash spread with crazy speed, and now all of Chicago was watching. Ryan had to push through the crowd. Hospital security carved a path for him. Then he saw Elena, his sister Ann, Law stood in front of a forest of cameras, wearing a funeral black dress, her face pale under makeup smeared by tears, her eyes red, shoulders shaking. Hands clenched together like she was trying not to collapse. "My husband, please, everyone, pray for my husband." Elena's voice broke between sobs. "Marcus is everything to me. I don't know what I'll do without him." Cameras blazed, capturing the image of a wife destroyed by grief. Reporters pushed and shoved to get the best angle. This was the top story, the moment the whole city waited for. Ryan stood behind them watching his sister, in-law in silence. Something felt off. He couldn't name it exactly, but an unfamiliar feeling poked at him from inside. Maybe it was how Elena stood, a touch too straight for someone falling apart. Maybe it was her eyes, flicking toward the camera lens with a calculation so subtle it was almost invisible. Or maybe Ryan was simply too stressed and imagining things. He pushed the thought aside and stepped toward Elena. Right then, the emergency room doors swung open. A doctor in bloody surgical clothes came out, his face grave. "Mr. Smith's family." Elena turned, eyes wide with fear. "I'm his wife. How is my husband?" The doctor took a deep breath. "We're doing everything we can, but his condition is critical. Severe head trauma. The family should prepare themselves." Elena crumpled. Her legs seemed to lose all strength, her body folding down like a puppet with cut strings. Ryan moved on instinct, catching his sister-in-law before she hit the floor. Holding her in his arms. "No, it can't be." Elena sobbed, burying her face against Ryan's chest. "Marcus? He can't die. He promised he'd stay with me forever." Ryan held her, trying to comfort her, while his own heart was breaking. But even inside that pain, he noticed something strange. Elena's tears didn't soak into his shirt. She was crying, sobbing, trembling in his arms, but the fabric against his chest stayed dry. Not a single tear actually fell. Ryan blinked, wondering if he'd seen it wrong. Maybe he was too overwhelmed. Maybe grief was messing with his mind. Elena loved Marcus. Everyone knew that. She'd been the perfect wife for 10 years, always at Marcus's side through everything. Something wasn't right. But pain blurred reason, and Ryan pushed the thought away. This wasn't the time for suspicion. This was the time to be strong, for Marcus, for the family, for everything they'd built, but the seed of doubt was planted. And one day it would grow. Dr. Raymond Cole was one of the best brain surgeons in Chicago. Tonight he faced the hardest case of his career. Marcus was rushed into the operating room in critical condition, his body mangled after the horrible crash. Severe brain injury with bleeding inside his skull, internal bleeding in his belly, 3 broken ribs, one almost puncturing a lung. Dr. Cole looked at the bruised, broken body on the table. He wondered if any miracle could save this man. But he fought anyway. For 6 hours, the medical team worked without stopping. Sweat ran down Dr. Cole's forehead as he carefully removed the blood clot pressing against Marcus's brain. Nurses watched the vital signs constantly, calling out even the smallest changes. Blood was given, medications were pushed. The whole operating room seemed to hold its breath with every faint beat of the patient's heart. Then the worst happened. The heart monitor suddenly released a long, terrifying sound. The jagged line flattened into a single bar. Marcus's heart had stopped. No pulse. "Get the defibrillator ready," Dr. Cole shouted, his voice echoing through the operating room that turned instantly chaotic. One nurse started chest compressions. Another prepared the defibrillator. 19 seconds. 19 seconds was how long Marcus's heart stopped. 19 seconds where the team fought death itself, clawing back every bit of hope. Shock, clear, the defibrillator sounded. Marcus's body jerked on the table. The line on the screen stayed flat, increased the power, shock again. The second time, his body jolted again, and then, like a miracle, the line began to rise and fall once more. Weak but steady, Marcus's heart was beating again. The whole operating room exhaled like they'd been brought back from the edge with him. Dr. Cole wiped the sweat from his face, his hand still shaking from the life, and death moment that just passed? They continued the operation, finishing the final steps before closing the cut. Marcus had survived. But the question was whether he would ever wake up. Outside the operating room, Ryan and Alina had waded through 6 hours of hell. When Dr. Cole stepped out in bloody scrubs, both of them stood at once. "The surgery is finished, doctor," Cole said, his voice exhausted but professional. "Mr. Smith is out of immediate danger, but his brain has been badly injured and it's swelling. He's in a deep coma now. When will he wake up?" Alina asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Cole was silent for a moment before answering. "We don't know. It could be a few days, a few weeks, a few months, or it could be never. The brain is the most complex organ. We can't predict what will happen." Alina broke into sobs, her shoulders shaking hard. She covered her face with her hands, her choked crying echoing down the empty hallway. "No, Marcus, you can't leave me. A perfect performance." If anyone looked closely, they might have noticed Alina's eyes were dry behind the fingers covering her face. Ryan stood still as stone, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles went white. He didn't cry, didn't speak. He only stared into nothing with hollow eyes. Marcus, the brother who raised him, was lying on the thin line between life and death. And Ryan could do nothing but wait. But nobody knew that inside the frozen body in the hospital bed, Marcus was waking up. He opened his eyes in darkness, not the darkness of the room, but the darkness of his own mind. He could hear the breathing machine's steady rhythm, the beep of the heart monitor, the footsteps of nurses moving outside. He heard everything. But when he tried to open his eyes, his lids didn't respond. When he tried to move a finger, his body didn't obey. When he tried to scream, his throat went silent. Like it had been crushed shut. Panic flooded Marcus's mind like a tidal wave. He was trapped, locked inside his own body. His mind fully awake, but unable to do anything, unable to speak, unable to let anyone know he was still alive inside this frozen shell. The first hours were hell. Marcus strained with everything he had to move to make any sound at all, to tell the outside world he was still here, but his body betrayed him completely. He could only lie there, listening, waiting. Then slowly, the survival instinct sharpened by years in the criminal world began to kick in. Marcus stopped panicking. He began to think. In the criminal world, information was worth more than bullets. Whoever knew more won. And now Marcus was in a position nobody would ever suspect. He could hear everything without anyone knowing he was listening. He could watch without anyone knowing he was watching. Everyone thought he was unconscious. They would say things they'd never say if he were awake. They would reveal their true faces. Marcus made a decision. He would not wake up, not yet. He would lie here, listen, gather information, and wait for the right moment. His silence would become his deadliest weapon. On the third night shift after the accident, St. Mary's Hospital settled into the familiar stillness of late hours. Hallways were empty, holding only the soft footsteps of night nurses and the steady breathing of machines behind closed doors. That's when Sophia stepped into Marcus's hospital room for the first time. She'd just been assigned to this special patient, replacing the previous nurse who asked for leave under the weight of pressure that came with the name of the man in that bed. Sophia was 27, slender with brown hair neatly tied back. Her blue eyes carried a deep sadness, a kind of sorrow that had become such a part of her that people no longer noticed it. She moved lightly but with certainty, every gesture marked by quiet professionalism of someone used to standing close to death. She set her chart on the table and began checking the machines around the bed. Heart monitor, breathing machine, Roman 4 bag, catheter. Sophia inspected everything with careful attention, recording each detail in the file. She was a good nurse, maybe one of the best here, but she never bragged about it. She simply did her job silently, faithfully. When she finished the checks, Sophia stood at the bedside and looked down at the motionless man. Marcus, she'd heard plenty about that name. Who in Chicago hadn't heard of the city's most powerful gang boss? People said he was dangerous, ruthless, a ghost of the criminal world. But Sophia had seen too many people in hospital beds to believe death cared who was powerful and who was weak. Before death, everyone was equal. Looking at Marcus's face, bruised and swollen, white bandages wrapped around his head, Sophia didn't see a gang boss. She saw a human being fighting to live, and it stirred memories she tried to bury for 2 years. 2 years earlier, on a night like this, Sophia had been working a night shift when her phone rang. A call from the fire department. The small house outside Chicago where her family lived had gone up in flames at 3 in the morning. When Sophia arrived, there was nothing left but ash and 3 burned bodies that couldn't be identified. Her father, her mother, and Tommy, her younger brother who was only 19. They hadn't made it out. The cause of the fire was never officially announced, but Sophia knew the truth. Her father had borrowed from loan sharks to pay for her mother's treatment, and when he couldn't repay, they burned the house as a warning to other people who owed money. Sophia had survived only because she'd been on a night shift. She'd survived because she hadn't been home. Now Sophia was alone in the world. She carried the debt her father left behind, living in a tiny studio apartment that had room for nothing more than a bed and a small table. She worked every day, not because she loved it, but because she didn't know what else to do. Her life was a chain of endless shifts, sleepless nights, and a loneliness no words could fully hold. Sophia blinked, pulling herself out of that painful river of memory. She looked at Marcus again, and somehow she felt an urge to talk to him. Maybe because the night was too quiet. Maybe because she'd grown too used to talking to herself. Or maybe because she believed coma patients could still hear, even if they couldn't respond. Sophia pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. She studied Marcus's still face and began to speak, her voice gentle, like sharing a secret. "I don't know who you are, Mr. Smith. I mean, I know what people say about you. They say you're dangerous. They say you're the kind of man nobody wants as an enemy." She paused, watching the heartbeat trace rising and falling steadily on the monitor. "But I've seen enough death to know when someone is fighting, and you're fighting. I can see that." Sophia leaned in, her voice turning more honest, more personal. "So don't give up, whoever you are, whatever you've done. You deserve a chance to fight. Everyone deserves that." Inside the frozen body, Marcus heard every word. And for the first time since he'd awakened inside the darkness of himself, he felt something warm. Not the chill in Elena's voice when she whispered about dancing on his grave. Not the fake worry in his wife's practiced performance, but sincerity, real concern from a complete stranger. This girl didn't know who he was. She wasn't afraid of him, didn't need anything from him, had no reason to be kind to him. And yet she was here in the quiet of late night, giving him encouragement his own wife never once offered. Marcus couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything to let her know he was listening, but in his mind he held on to that voice. Sophia's voice, the voice of a stranger who wanted him to live while the wife of 10 years was waiting for him to die. On the 5th day after the accident, St. Mary's Hospital received a special visitor. Dr. Nathan Reed, one of Chicago's leading brain specialists, was invited to consult on Marcus's case. Nathan was 40, tall with neatly combed salt and pepper hair and sharp, icy gray eyes. He moved with the confidence of a man used to admiration, every gesture carrying arrogance hidden beneath a layer of professional courtesy. His reputation in the medical world was undeniable. He'd saved hundreds of patients through the most complex brain surgeries. The name Nathan Reed had become synonymous with excellence in brain medicine. But nobody knew that behind that perfect exterior was a completely different man. Nathan entered Marcus's hospital room alone, closing the door behind him. He stood beside the bed and looked down at the motionless man with eyes that held not a trace of compassion. Instead, the corner of his mouth lifted into a contemptuous smile. "You're more stubborn than she said." Nathan murmured, his voice cold as ice, "But it's fine. It doesn't matter. Marcus heard everything. That sentence rang through his mind like an alarm bell. She said, who was Nathan talking about? Someone had spoken to Nathan about him, and that person clearly didn't want him to survive. A chill spread through Marcus's chest as he began fitting the pieces together. The sound of the door opening cut through Marcus's thoughts. A familiar step, the soft tap of high heels against tile. "Elena, I'm here," she said, but not in the trembling, grief-stricken voice she used in front of others. This was her natural voice, easy, relaxed, almost eager. "Nobody saw you come in, did they?" Nathan asked. "No, I was careful." Marcus felt like a knife had just been driven straight through his chest. Elena and Nathan. They knew each other, not just as doctor and patient's family member. The way they spoke, the intimacy in their tone. It all pointed to something far deeper. "How is it?" Elena asked, impatience edging her words. "How much longer?" Nathan exhaled. "His brain damage is pretty severe. He might never wake up on his own." "Might?" Elena stressed every syllable. "I don't want to hear might, Nathan. I want certainty." A heavy silence settled over the room. Marcus held his breath, waiting for what came next. "What if he wakes up?" Elena went on, her voice turning frighteningly cold. "What if he recovers completely?" Nathan hesitated before answering, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "There are ways to make sure that doesn't happen." Marcus's heart seemed to stop. Had he misheard? No. He heard every word clearly. Nathan Reed, a doctor, was suggesting killing him. And Elena, his wife, the woman he'd shared a life with for 10 years, was listening without the slightest objection. "Do it," Elena said, her tone final, like placing an order. "I've waited 10 years. I don't want to wait anymore." "Are you sure?" Nathan asked. "Once we start, there's no going back." "I've never been more sure." Elena's voice was still. "Marcus stole 10 years of my youth. He turned me into a decoration in his fancy mansion. I deserve more than that. I deserve to have everything." Nathan gave a soft laugh. "And you will have everything. His money, his power. All of it will be yours as the grieving widow." "The grieving widow," Elena repeated, her voice edged with mockery. "I like the sound of that." Inside his frozen body, Marcus felt his world collapsing around him. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a death sentence signed by the very woman he trusted most in his life. Elena wasn't only cheating. She was plotting to kill him, and Nathan Reed, the man invited to save him, had been invited to make sure he never woke up. 10 years? Marcus had given 10 years of his life to this woman. He'd protected her, given her everything she wanted, trusted her completely, and this was how she repaid him, with a knife in his back, with a cold, calculated plan to take his life. "I miss you," Elena suddenly said, her voice turning softer, but not for Marcus. Footsteps shifted, then the sound of a kiss. Marcus knew they were kissing right beside his bed, right in front of him. The man they believed was in a coma. "Soon," Nathan whispered. "Soon we won't have to hide anymore. I can't wait," Elena answered, desire thick in her voice. Their footsteps faded, then the door closed, the room sank into silence. Marcus laid there, motionless. But inside him a violent storm raged. Rage, pain, and resolve. They wanted him dead, so he would live. He would live to see the day they paid for everything. Ryan sat in Marcus's office in the high-rise building overlooking downtown Chicago. But he wasn't looking out the window. His eyes were fixed on the photographs spread across the desk. Images of him and Marcus through the years. From when Ryan was a 12-year-old boy who'd lost his parents to the day he became the right-hand man of the most powerful gang leader in Chicago. Marcus wasn't just his brother. He was his father, his teacher, the only person Ryan had ever trusted without question in this world. And now that man was lying in a hospital bed, deep in a coma, with nobody knowing whether he would live or die. The phone rang, shattering the silence. Ryan glanced at the screen. An unfamiliar number, but he answered anyway. In the criminal world, sometimes the most important calls came from numbers nobody would expect. "Ryan," he said, his voice cold, guarded. "Ryan, it's been a long time." The voice on the other end made Ryan go rigid. He knew it instantly. Victor Santos, Marcus's longtime enemy, the boss who controlled Chicago's East Side. The man who'd tried again and again to take over their territory and failed every time. Victor was an old fox of the criminal world. Cunning, ruthless, and never one to miss a chance to stab an opponent in the back. Victor, Ryan answered, forcing his tone to stay even. What do you want? I heard about your brother. What a tragedy. Victor's voice carried sympathy so fake it made Ryan's stomach turn. Chicago sends its condolences. Ryan ground his teeth. He knew this wasn't a sympathy call. Victor Santos never did anything without a purpose. Every word was a blade hidden under sweet silk. My brother isn't dead, Ryan said, his voice hard. If you're calling to give condolences, you're a little early. Victor chuckled, a low, dull sound through the phone like stones grinding together. Not dead, that's right. But you know, Ryan, in our world, not yet is a very fragile phrase. Today, not yet. Tomorrow it could be different. Are you threatening me? Ryan asked flatly. Threatening you? No, I'm only stating the truth, Victor went on, his voice turning more serious. Business doesn't stop just because one man goes down, Ryan. Marcus is in the hospital. Nobody knows when he'll wake up or if he'll wake up at all. Meanwhile, his partners are nervous. His territory is sitting open. And there are plenty of people ready to fill those empty spaces. Ryan tightened his grip on the phone until his knuckles went white. My brother will wake up. And when he does, you'd better pray you haven't done anything you'll regret. I don't pray, Ryan, I act, Victor replied. Maybe it's time we sat down and discussed some new terms. New arrangements for a new reality. You're a smart man. You know what I mean. I know you're trying to fish in muddy water. Ryan said, contempt thick in his voice, but you're forgetting one thing. My brother isn't dead. And as long as he's breathing, I won't let anyone touch what belongs to our family. Victor went silent for a moment, then laughed again. As long as he's breathing. Nice line. His voice dropped cold and threatening. But you should remember, Ryan, in this world, breath can be cut off at any time. See you soon. The call ended. Ryan sat there, staring at the dark phone screen, his mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts. Victor Santos had called right after Marcus's accident. Not a day later, not a week later, but only a few days after, as if he'd known in advance, as if he'd been waiting. A dark thought began to take shape in Ryan's mind. Was Marcus's crash really an accident? A truck with no lights, no brakes, bursting from the dark, then disappearing without a trace. The driver vanished like smoke. Nobody had found a single lead, and now Victor Santos was here, ready to swallow Marcus's territory like a vulture waiting for its prey to stop breathing. Ryan didn't believe in coincidence. In the criminal world, there was no coincidence, only plots and action. He picked up the phone and dialed another number. After a few rings, a warm, steady voice answered. Harold Bennett speaking. Harold, it's Ryan. I need your help with something. Harold Bennett was the family's personal attorney. A 55-year-old man with silver hair and sharp eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. He was one of the few people outside the family Marcus trusted completely. What do you need, Ryan? Harold asked. I need you to check everything. My brother's assets, his will. The inheritance, everything connected to who gets what if he. Ryan didn't finish the sentence, but Harold understood. You think someone's targeting Marcus? I don't know, Ryan admitted, but I need to know who stands to gain the most if my brother dies. And I need to know now. I'll start immediately, Harold said, his tone grave. Ryan, do you think the accident wasn't an accident? Ryan looked out the window where Chicago sprawled beneath the night lights like a carpet of diamonds. Somewhere out there, someone was plotting against his family, and he would find them, even if he had to turn the whole city upside down. I don't know, Harold, but I'll find out. On the 7th night after the accident, St. Mary's Hospital sank into the familiar hush of late hours. Sophia sat at the nurse's station, fluorescent light washing down over the stack of medical charts in front of her. It was her habit on every night shift to recheck every patient's medication record, to make sure nothing had been missed. Marcus had become her special patient, not because of who he was, but because she'd spent so many nights sitting by his bed, talking to him as if he could hear her. Sophia turned to Marcus's medication notes and began comparing them with the original treatment plan. Her eyes moved line by line, checking dosages, timing, the signatures of the prescribing doctors. Everything looked normal. Until she stopped at one number, midazolam, the sedative used to keep a coma patient stable. The original dose was 2 milligrams every 6 hours. But over the past 2 days, the dose had been increased 3 times, reaching 6 milligrams every 6 hours. Sophia frowned and flipped back through earlier pages to confirm. She wasn't mistaken. The dosage had tripled in a very short time. And the signature authorizing it was Dr. Nathan Reed. She knew Nathan Reed, who in this hospital didn't know that famous brain specialist. He'd been invited to consult on Marcus, and everyone trusted his judgment without question. But something wasn't right. Sophia had been a nurse for 5 years. She knew exactly what each medication did. Midazolam at a dose that high wouldn't just keep a patient sedated. It would suppress the central nervous system, slowing the brain's recovery. In other words, instead of helping Marcus wake up, this drug was keeping him buried deep in coma. This isn't treatment, Sophia whispered to herself, her voice trembling. This is. She couldn't make herself finish the thought. It was too terrifying, too insane. A celebrated doctor like Nathan Reed couldn't do something like that. There had to be a medical reason she didn't understand. There had to be, but Sophia couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at her. She took out her phone and searched for information on safe midazolam, dosing for traumatic brain injury. The results confirmed what she feared. The dose Nathan Reed was ordering was far beyond the safe range. There was no medical justification for increasing it that fast, especially for a patient whose brain needed every chance to recover. Nathan Reed was poisoning Marcus, slowly, quietly, under the cover of medical treatment. Sophia's hands shook. She was just a nurse, with no money, no power, no one to rely on. Marcus was the most powerful gang boss in Chicago, surrounded by a world she didn't belong to. Elena was his legal wife, the beautiful, powerful woman Sophia had seen on TV crying and begging her husband to wake up. Nathan Reed was a renowned doctor with a spotless reputation. If Sophia spoke up, who would believe her? An ordinary nurse accusing a top specialist of killing a patient. They'd laugh in her face. They'd say she was jealous, delusional, or trying to get attention. And worse, if Nathan Reed really was doing this, if he found out she discovered it, what would happen to her? Sophia wasn't naive. She knew people willing to kill usually didn't hesitate to kill one more to keep a mouth shut. She could stay silent. She could pretend she'd seen nothing, knew nothing. She could keep doing her job and leave Marcus's fate to be decided by other people. But then Tommy's face rose in her mind. Her brother, 19, with a bright smile and a dream of becoming a doctor. Tommy had died in a fire that nobody saved him from. Tommy had died because people with power decided his life wasn't worth much. Tommy had died because nobody stood up to protect her family. If Sophia stayed silent tonight, she would become part of the darkness that killed her brother. She would become someone who watched while an innocent person was harmed. She would betray herself and everything she believed in. I've already lost everyone, Sophia whispered, her blue eyes turning toward the hospital room where Marcus lay. I'm not letting it happen to someone else. She stood, took a bag of normal saline from the medication cabinet. Her hands shook as she walked toward Marcus's room, her eyes constantly scanning to make sure nobody was watching. The hallway was empty, only the echo of her own footsteps in the late night. Sophia entered the hospital room and closed the door behind her. She looked at the sedative drip feeding into Marcus, then down at the bag of normal saline in her hand. This was a point of no return. If she did this and got caught, she'd lose her job, lose everything. But if she didn't, Marcus would die. Sophia drew a deep breath and began replacing the bag. Her hands still trembled, but her movements were fast and precise, sharpened by years of experience. She removed the midazolam, hung the saline, adjusted the drip rate to match exactly what it had been before. Nobody glancing at it would see the difference. Marcus wouldn't receive the poison anymore, and his brain would have a chance to recover. When she finished, Sophia stood by the bed and looked down at the motionless man. "I don't know if you deserve to be saved," she whispered, "but you deserve a chance to fight, everyone does." Inside his frozen body, Marcus heard it all, and for the first time, he understood that this stranger was risking her life to protect him. On the 8th night, Sophia returned to Marcus's hospital room with a bag of normal saline hidden in her pocket. She'd done it the night before and nothing had happened. Nobody had noticed. The medication had been swapped. Marcus had remained there, and the world had kept turning as if nothing had changed. But tonight, she had a sense of unease she couldn't explain. Maybe it was because the hallway felt too empty. Maybe it was the way the lights flickered strangely at the far end of the corridor. Or maybe it was simply her nerves stretched tight as wire after days of living inside a secret. Sophia slipped into the room and closed the door softly behind her. She looked at Marcus lying motionless on the bed, the breathing machine's steady rhythm like the pulse of time itself. "I'm back again," she whispered, even though she believed he couldn't hear, or at least that's what she thought. She moved to the bedside, pulled out the saline bag, and began the replacement routine. Her hands were steadier than last night. No longer trembling the way they had the first time, she unhooked the sedative bag, ready to hang the saline instead. Then she heard footsteps, leather shoes tapping against tile, even, confident, coming closer and closer. Someone was walking toward this room. Sophia's heart climbed into her throat. She rushed, hands shaking, trying to finish before whoever it was arrived, but the urgency unbalanced her. The saline bag slipped from her fingers. Nearly falling to the floor, Sophia caught it in time, but the clumsy motion made her drop the sedative bag onto Marcus's bed. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Sophia shoved the sedative bag into her pocket, snapped the saline into the Roman 4-line as fast as she could, and adjusted the drip rate with desperate speed. She had just finished when the door opened. Nathan Reed stepped inside. He stood in the doorway, his tall frame throwing a dark shadow against the hallway light. His icy gray eyes swept the room, then locked on Sophia. "Working late, Nurse Sophia." Nathan's voice was gentle, but there was a hidden edge beneath it that made Sophia's spine go cold. She forced her face into calm, refusing to show even a flicker of panic. "Just checking the vital signs, doctor." Sophia answered, so steady she surprised herself. "It's my routine on night shift." Nathan nodded slowly and walked in. Each of his steps felt like a drumbeat counting down inside Sophia's head. He stopped at the bedside, looked down at Marcus, then lifted his gaze to the Roman 4 bag. Sophia felt her heart stop. He was staring at it. He was staring at what she'd just replaced. Would he notice? Had she missed something? Some tiny difference? Had she made one fatal mistake? The moment stretched on, endless. Nathan stood there in silence, gray eyes fixed on the drip. Sophia stood on the other side of the bed, fighting not to breathe too fast, not to sweat, not to do anything that might feed his suspicion. She could feel the sedative bag in her pocket, heavy as an accusation. If Nathan asked to check, if he found it, everything would be over, not just her career, maybe her life. At last, Nathan turned to Sophia. He didn't speak. He only looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. She felt exposed, as if he could see straight through her and into every secret she was trying to hide. "The vital signs are stable," Sophia said, trying to break the terrifying silence. "Nothing abnormal." Nathan nodded slowly. "Good, let me know if anything changes." He turned and walked toward the door. Sophia felt like a stone had been lifted off her chest. She wanted to exhale, to sit down, because her legs were shaking so hard they threatened to fold. But she didn't. She stood there, wearing her professional mask, waiting for Nathan to leave. Nathan stepped through the doorway. But then he stopped. He turned his head back, looking at Sophia over his shoulder. His eyes were different now. No longer cold and blank, but filled with suspicion and calculation. She could almost see the gears turning, fitting pieces together, searching for what didn't belong. "Nurse Sophia," Nathan said, his voice slow. You seem very devoted to this patient. Sophia swallowed hard. I'm devoted to all my patients, doctor. Nathan watched her a moment longer, then nodded, of course. Have a good night, he left, his footsteps fading down the corridor. Sophia stood frozen until the sound was completely gone. Then she let out a breath, trembling with fear. Her knees nearly buckled, and she had to grip the bed rail to keep from falling. She knew Nathan was suspicious. That last look had said everything. He wasn't certain yet, but he was watching, and once Nathan Reed started watching someone, that person wasn't safe anymore. Sophia was walking a wire. One small mistake, one careless second, and she'd plunge into the abyss. But she couldn't stop, not now, not while Marcus still laid there, depending on the saline bags she swapped each night. Inside the frozen body, Marcus had heard everything, the conversation, the tension in Sophia's voice, Nathan's suspicious stare, and for the first time he understood an astonishing truth. This girl, this stranger of a nurse he'd never known, was risking her life to protect him, not for money, not for power, not for anything he could ever give her. She was doing it simply because she believed it was right. In Marcus's world, where loyalty was bought with money and betrayal was ordinary, that kind of selfless kindness was a luxury he'd forgotten existed. And now, trapped in his own darkness, he felt it again, from someone who was completely unknown to him. On the 9th night, St. Mary's Hospital sank into the deep stillness of the very latest hours. The hallway was empty, holding only the pale glow of fluorescent lights and the steady pulse of machines drifting out from patient rooms. Sophia sat in the chair beside Marcus's bed, her body worn down to the bone after days of unbroken strain. She'd already changed the drip, checked the numbers, finished everything that needed doing, but she didn't want to leave. Something held her there, an invisible thread tying her to the man lying motionless in the bed. Tonight, Sophia felt lonelier than she ever had. The encounter with Nathan Reed still haunted her, his suspicious eyes burning into her back every time she walked the hospital corridors. She knew she was playing with fire, risking her life for a man she didn't even know, but she couldn't stop. She'd come too far to turn around now, Sophia began, her voice light as breath in the quiet. It was her habit, talking to coma patients. Studies said they might be able to hear, and whether they could or not, speaking made her feel a little less alone. I had a little brother. His name was Tommy. She paused, swallowing hard. This was the first time she'd spoken about Tommy to anyone since the fire. Not to coworkers, not to friends, not to anyone, but tonight, in this still room, beside a man she was risking everything to save, Sophia felt she could finally open her heart. Tommy wanted to be a doctor. She went on, her voice trembling slightly. He was always talking about saving people, about helping the sick. He was so smart. He got into medical school on a full scholarship. Our whole family was so proud of him. A tear slipped down Sophia's cheek. She didn't bother to wipe it away. Isn't it ironic? My brother wanted to be a doctor so he could save people. And I'm a nurse. I was trained to care for patients, to keep people alive, but I couldn't save my own family. The breathing machine's steady rhythm sounded like the heartbeat of time itself, indifferent to her pain. That night, I was here at the hospital on a night shift. By the time I got the call, everything was already over. My parents, Tommy, all of them couldn't get out. The house burned to the ground. Sophia lowered her head. And now her tears were coming in a stream. Sometimes I wonder why I survived. What does it mean to be the only one left? I wake up every day in an empty apartment, go to work, come home, and there's nobody to talk to, nobody to share with, nobody to remember my family with me. She lifted her hand to wipe her tears, and without thinking, she took Marcus's hand. His hand was warm, still carrying life, even though his body laid unmoving as stone. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Sophia whispered, maybe because you can't judge me. Maybe because you're the only one I can talk to without having to pretend I'm strong. She gave Marcus's hand a gentle squeeze, searching for a little comfort in his warmth, and then she felt it. A faint pressure, Marcus's fingers tightened around hers. Sophia froze. She told herself she'd imagined it. Her body had been tense too long. She'd gone too many nights without sleep. Her mind had to be playing tricks on her. But she waited anyway, holding her breath, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it inside her ears. A few seconds passed, nothing happened. Sophia exhaled, letting out a small, sad laugh at herself. What was she expecting? Marcus was in a deep coma, his brain severely injured. A hand squeeze was only the illusion of a tired, lonely girl. Then a thought flashed through her mind. What if it wasn't an illusion? Can you hear me? Sophia whispered. Her voice shaking, she squeezed Marcus's hand softly, like a signal. 1 second, 2, 3, then Marcus's fingers tightened again. This time clearer, more deliberate, impossible to mistake. Sophia's mouth fell open, her blue eyes widening in shock. Her heart felt like it was trying to break free of her chest. She stared down at their joined hands, at Marcus's fingers, then up at his motionless face. He was awake. Marcus was fully conscious. He was listening. He was here, trapped inside this frozen body, hearing everything, everything. The thought cut through Sophia's mind like lightning. If he was awake, if he could hear, then he'd heard it all. Elena's poisonous whispers, Nathan's conversation with his wife about how to kill him, everything Sophia had done to protect him. Dear God, Sophia whispered, her voice catching. You know everything. She waited. Marcus squeezed once. Confirmation. Tears slid down Sophia's cheeks again. But this time they weren't only grief. She didn't know what she was feeling. Relief that he was still here. Terror at what he'd heard. Or a trembling realization that she wasn't alone in this fight anymore. I'll help you, she whispered, tightening her grip on his hand. I don't know how yet, but I'll find a way. You're not alone. Inside the frozen body, Marcus listened. And for the first time since he'd awakened in his own darkness, he felt a thread of hope. This girl, this slender nurse with sad blue eyes, had become his only ally in a war he couldn't even fight. After that night, Sophia knew she couldn't keep fighting this battle alone. Marcus was awake, but powerless, and she could protect him from Nathan Reed's poison, but she had no authority, no voice, no way to do anything beyond swapping Roman 4 bags in the dark. She needed an ally, someone with power, someone who could act, and the only person she could think of was Ryan. But getting to Ryan wasn't easy. Every time he came to the hospital to see Marcus, Elena was always there beside him, like a shadow that couldn't be separated. She played the role of the perfect grieving wife so flawlessly, it made Sophia feel sick every time she saw her. Elena cried, Elena prayed, Elena held her husband's hand and whispered words of love. It was all theater. And Sophia was the only one who knew the truth. For 2 days, Sophia watched Ryan's schedule. She memorized the times he arrived, the times he left, the rare moments when he was alone. Finally, she found an opening. Ryan usually parked in the hospital's underground garage. And there was a brief window between the moment he left Marcus's room and the moment he drove away. That was her only chance. That afternoon, Sophia ended her shift early and waited in the parking garage. Her heart hammered when she saw Ryan step out of the elevator, tall, hard-faced, his cold eyes sweeping the space like a hunting animal that never stopped watching. Sophia drew a deep breath and stepped out to block his path. Ryan stopped instantly, his gaze narrowing as he looked at her. She could see his body tighten, ready for any threat. Who are you? What do you want? Ryan's voice was ice, edged with danger. Sophia knew she had only seconds before he shoved her aside, or worse. Your brother can hear everything, she said fast, her voice low and urgent. He's awake inside and someone is trying to kill him. Ryan went still. For a moment the cold mask cracked, shock and confusion showing underneath, but a heartbeat later, he regained control. His hand shot out and grabbed Sophia by the collar, yanking her close with terrifying strength. If this is a trap. Ryan growled, his face inches from hers, eyes burning into her. I swear I'll teach you what regret feels like. Sophia wasn't afraid, or rather she was. but she wouldn't let fear stop her. She'd faced the deaths of her entire family. Survived the darkest nights of her life. Ryan was frightening, but she had nothing left to lose. Check the medication chart. Sophia said, her voice so calm she surprised herself. Dr. Nathan Reed has tripled the sedative dose over the past week. At that dosage, your brother's brain will never recover. That isn't treatment, it's poisoning. Ryan didn't speak. But she saw his eyes flicker. Processing. Your sister-in-law visits every day, but she never stays longer than 15 minutes. She cries in front of everyone, but her tears are never real. And Dr. Nathan Reed, the man invited to save your brother, has a relationship with her. Sophia held Ryan's gaze, put the pieces together. Ryan stared at her for a long moment. She could feel him weighing her, testing her, searching for any sign of deception. But Sophia had nothing to hide. She let him see everything. The fear in her eyes, the resolve in her voice, and the truth she was trying to give him. Finally, Ryan released her. "Prove it," he said, his voice still cold, but less openly threatening. They went together to Marcus's hospital room. Sophia led, Ryan close behind, both of them alert to everything around them. By luck, the hallway was empty. Nobody saw them. Once inside, Sophia closed the door and stepped to Marcus's bedside. She took his hand gently. The way she always did. "Mr. Smith, your brother is here," she said. "I told him, now you need to show him." Ryan stood beside her, watching with suspicion, but also with hope he couldn't hide. Sophia turned to him. "One squeeze means yes. 2 squeezes means no. Ask him anything." Ryan swallowed hard, then stepped closer to the bed. He looked down at his brother, the man he'd admired more than anyone in his life, now lying still beneath wires and machines. "Can you hear me?" Ryan asked, his voice shaking slightly. "1 squeeze." Sophia felt the pressure in Marcus's hand. Clear and deliberate, she nodded to Ryan to confirm. Ryan drew a breath, and his eyes began to redden. "Elena, she wants to hurt you, doesn't she? 1 squeeze." Ryan's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists. Sophia could see the fury flare inside him, the betrayal from his sister-in-law, like a blade driven into the loyalty he'd given his family. "I'll kill her," Ryan snarled, hatred thick in his voice. "I'll kill them both right now." But before he could turn away, Marcus squeezed twice. Ryan froze, staring down at his brother's hand. "No. You don't want me to act. 2 squeezes again. Confirmation." Ryan turned to Sophia, bewilderment on his face. "Why? They're trying to kill him." Sophia looked at Marcus, then back at Ryan. She understood. She'd spent enough time beside this man to understand how his mind worked. "He needs more information," she said. "He's gathering proof. If you act right now, they can deny everything. But if you wait, if you let them expose themselves, you'll have everything you need to destroy them completely." Ryan watched his brother for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The rage in his eyes didn't vanish, but it tightened into control, turning into a cold, focused resolve. "All right, brother, I'll wait. But when the time comes, I'll be the one who ends them." After the meeting in the hospital room, Ryan began to watch Elena like an invisible shadow. He hired people to keep eyes on her 24 hours a day, recording every meeting, every phone call, every place her feet touched, and in only 3 days he had what he needed. Elena met Victor Santos in secret at a small Italian restaurant in the suburbs of Chicago, the kind of place an ordinary person would never think to look for Marcus's wife. Ryan didn't dare get too close for fear of being seen, but he'd hired a professional photographer with a telephoto lens to stand across the street. The photos showed Elena and Victor sitting across from each other in a hidden corner, their heads bent close like 2 conspirators planning something dark. At one point, Victor took Elena's hand, and she didn't pull away. That night, Ryan brought the photos to Marcus's hospital room. Sophia was on the night shift as usual, and she'd become the bridge the 2 brothers couldn't function without. Ryan sat beside his brother and spread the photos out. "As if Marcus could see them. You can't see them," Ryan said, his voice catching, "but I'll describe them to you." Elena met Victor Santos at a suburban restaurant. They sat alone and talked for almost an hour. Victor held her hand. She didn't object one squeeze. Marcus heard and understood. Ryan went on to report what Harold Bennett, the family attorney, had uncovered after Ryan asked him to investigate. Harold was meticulous, careful, the kind of man who missed nothing when he dug into someone's finances. And what he found was even more terrifying than the photographs. Harold found a secret account under a fake name in a Swiss bank. Ryan said, over the past 8 months, 3 large transfers were made into it, totaling nearly $2 million. The money came from a fake company Harold traced back to Victor Santos. One squeeze. Marcus was still listening. There's more, Ryan continued, his voice shaking with anger. Harold found a digital agreement encrypted inside Elena's email. She sold you out to Victor Santos. In exchange, she'll receive 30% of your assets after you die, plus a safe position when Victor takes over the entire territory. Sophia stood nearby, listening in silence. She felt like she was sinking into a dark swamp she'd never imagined existed. This wasn't only an affair or a private betrayal. This was criminal world politics, a power grab at the highest level. Marcus wasn't only betrayed by his wife. He was being sold to his enemy like property. The condition of the deal, Ryan ground out as he went on, is that you have to die, and it has to look natural. No suspicion, no evidence. That's why they needed Nathan Reed. He's the pawn, the one who does the dirty work. He gets paid, and he gets Elena, and in return, he makes sure you never wake up. Ryan stopped, his breathing heavy. About your accident, I'm starting to think it wasn't an accident. Victor Santos has the resources to stage a collision like that. A truck with no lights, a driver who disappears without a trace. It's all too perfect to be random. The room fell silent after Ryan finished. The breathing machine kept its steady rhythm. Like the heartbeat of time itself, indifferent to the conspiracies and betrayals being laid bare, Sophia looked down at Marcus's hand in hers, waiting for a response, but there was nothing. No single squeeze, no double squeeze. Marcus was completely still. That moment stretched out, endless. Ryan looked at Sophia with worry, wondering if his brother could still hear, or if the weight of this news had been too much. Then Sophia felt it. Marcus's hand trembled faintly in hers. Not the tremor of fear or weakness. This was the tremor of restrained fury, of a storm building inside a body that couldn't erupt. Sophia had held enough patient's hands to know the difference between kinds of trembling. Shivering from cold, shaking from fear, trembling from pain, but this was different. It came from deep inside, from a place even Coma couldn't touch. He isn't afraid, Sophia told Ryan, her voice soft but certain. He's angry. Ryan looked down at his brother, and for the first time since learning the truth, he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who knew his enemy had underestimated the opponent. Marcus wasn't the kind of man who went down easily. He'd built an empire from nothing, survived countless plots and betrayals, become the most powerful gang leader in Chicago through intelligence and ruthlessness when it was needed. Elena and Victor Santos thought they'd won because Marcus laid motionless in a hospital bed. But they didn't know that man was still listening, still thinking, still planning, and when he woke, they would pay for everything. We keep gathering evidence. Ryan said, his voice cold as steel. When you wake up, we'll have everything we need to bury them. One squeeze from Marcus. Confirmation. The war had only just begun. Elena was sitting in her car in the hospital parking lot when her phone rang. Victor Santos's number lit up on the screen, and she knew this wasn't a social call. Hurry up. Victor's voice came the moment she answered. Cold and impatient. I can't wait forever. My rivals are starting to suspect. They're testing my boundaries. I need Marcus to disappear before they figure out what I'm planning. Elena clenched her jaw. I'm doing everything I can. Nathan needs time to. Victor cut her off, his voice edged with menace. You've had a whole week. I'm starting to wonder whether you really want this deal to succeed. Of course I do, Elena said quickly, forcing her voice to stay even. I'll talk to Nathan today. It'll be over this week. It had better be, Victor said and hung up. Elena sat there for a moment, fighting to control the wild thudding of her heart. She couldn't let everything fall apart when she'd come this far. 10 years she'd waited, 10 years living in Marcus's shadow. And now freedom was right in front of her. She wouldn't let anyone or anything stop her. An hour later, she met Nathan in his office at the hospital. She closed the door, making sure nobody could hear. Increase the dose, Elena said flatly. End it this week. Nathan frowned, worry creasing his face. If he dies too fast, they'll investigate. A patient who's stable and then suddenly dies will raise questions. Then make it look like a complication, Elena said, her voice sharp as glass. You're the doctor. Figure it out. Respiratory failure, infection, anything. That's your job. Nathan hesitated, but in the end he nodded. He was in too deep to turn back now, all right, but it'd be safer if we transfer him to my facility. There, I control everything, and there won't be any eyes watching. Elena nodded. It was the perfect plan. She'd file a transfer request today, citing the need for more specialized care. Nobody could stop a wife who wanted the best for her husband. But she was wrong. That afternoon, as Elena walked down the hospital corridor after submitting the transfer request, a figure stepped into her path. Ryan stood in front of her, his face ice cold, his eyes burning with hatred. Where are you taking my brother? Ryan asked, his voice low and dangerous. Elena startled, but she recovered quickly. She was the best actress she knew. And she wasn't about to let her brother-in-law ruin her plan. Somewhere better, she replied, layering her voice with practiced worry. Dr. Reed recommended a rehabilitation center that specializes in traumatic brain injury. They've got more advanced equipment. They can help Marcus recover faster. My brother stays here, Ryan said, not giving an inch. Nobody is transferring him anywhere. Elena felt heat rush to her head. She'd tolerated this brother-in-law long enough, always glued to Marcus like a loyal dog. Always looking at her with suspicion. I'm Marcus's legal wife, Elena said, her tone turning cold. I have the right to make medical decisions for my husband. You're only his brother, Ryan. You don't have a say here. Ryan stepped closer, his eyes like fire, meant to burn her down on the spot. And I'm the one who holds my brother's medical power of attorney. Did you forget that? Elena went pale. Medical power of attorney? She hadn't known. Marcus had never told her he'd signed papers giving Ryan authority over all medical decisions if Marcus couldn't make them himself. It was something she'd missed for 10 years. Confident that as his wife, she'd automatically control everything. When did he sign that? Elena asked, forcing her voice to stay steady while something inside her boiled. Before he married you, Ryan replied, a cold smile flickering across his mouth. My brother never puts all his eggs in one basket. You should know that. Elena stood there, unable to speak. It felt like a punch to the gut, her perfect plan collapsing right in front of her. If you lay a hand on my brother again, Ryan said, his voice dropping into a direct threat, I swear I'll show you what consequences look like. And you know I'm not joking. Elena swallowed hard, then turned and walked away without another word. But as she went, her eyes filled with hatred slid back to Ryan one last time. This war wasn't over. She'd find another way, and when she did, both Marcus and Ryan would pay. Nathan Reed sat in his office staring at Marcus's blood test, results with an expression he couldn't quite name. Something was wrong. Based on the sedative dosage he'd ordered, the midazolam level in Marcus's blood should have been far higher than this. With the amount being infused, the patient should have been buried in a coma, too deep to climb out of. And yet the numbers suggested Marcus's brain activity was improving faster than expected. Impossible. Nathan had calculated everything carefully. Suspicion began to harden inside him, and he decided to investigate. He contacted hospital security and demanded to review the hallway surveillance footage around the hospital room for the past week. Sitting in front of the monitor, he fast-forwarded through hours of recordings, hunting for anything out of place. And he found it. Sophia, the slender nurse with sad blue eyes, appeared in Marcus's room every night. More often than any other nurse, she stayed longer than necessary, and what caught Nathan's attention most was the way she hovered near the Roman 4 bag. He checked the nursing logs. Sophia was the last person to handle the Roman 4 bag each night before the morning shift began. This wasn't coincidence. A surge of anger flared in Nathan's chest. She was sabotaging his plan. She was swapping the medication. It was the only explanation for why Marcus wasn't responding to midazolam the way he was supposed to. A small-time nurse daring to interfere with his work, Nathan decided he'd teach her a lesson. That evening, Nathan waited in the underground parking garage, where he knew Sophia would pass after her shift ended. Flickering, fluorescent lights cast alternating pools of brightness and shadow, and the cold air of the garage made the place feel more menacing than ever. When Sophia stepped out of the elevator, her body heavy with fatigue after a long night, she didn't notice the figure standing beside a concrete pillar near her car. Not until a voice spoke, "Nurse Sophia, we need to talk." Sophia startled and turned, her heart leaping into her throat when she saw Nathan Reid emerge from the darkness. He wore a black coat, his face half, lit in halves, wallowed by the flickering light, like someone stepping out of a nightmare. "About what, Doctor?" Sophia asked, forcing her voice to stay steady even as she shook inside. Nathan moved closer, each step echoing through the empty garage. "You're very devoted to Mr. Smith, almost too devoted." Sophia swallowed hard. "I'm devoted to all my patients, really." Nathan tilted his head, gray eyes cold as scalpels. "Or are you doing something else?" "I don't understand what you mean. Don't play games with me," Nathan snarled, suddenly grabbing Sophia's wrist and yanking her toward him. His grip tightened until it hurt, fingers like iron clamps crushing her slender wrist. "I know what you're doing. I watched the cameras, I checked the logs. You're the last one touching the Roman 4 bag every night, and my medication isn't working the way it should." "Do you want to explain that?" Pain shot through Sophia's wrist, but she didn't scream, she didn't beg. She'd already lost her whole family, lived through the darkest nights of her life. Nathan Reid was terrifying. But she had nothing left to lose. "If I find out you're interfering with my treatment," Nathan went on, his voice dropping into a direct threat, "you won't just lose your job, you'll disappear completely. Like you never existed. Do you understand?" Sophia met his gaze, and in that moment she saw Nathan Reid's true nature. Not a devoted doctor, but a cold, blooded killer hiding beneath a white coat. "I understand that you're hurting me, doctor," Sophia said, her voice so calm she surprised even herself. Nathan stared at her a beat, then suddenly released her. He gave a cold laugh, the sound echoing through the empty garage. "Good girl, remember this conversation." He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the darkness. Sophia stood there, her legs shaking, threatening to give out. She looked down at her wrist where bruises were already blooming from Nathan's fingers. She wanted to cry, to scream, to run from all of it, but she didn't. She drew a deep breath, steadied herself, and walked back to the elevator. She still had one more thing she had to do tonight. 15 minutes later, Sophia stood by Marcus's bed in the hospital room. She took his hand, her whisper urgent. "They know something's wrong. Nathan threatened me. He suspects I'm swapping the medication." She paused, swallowing hard. "We don't have much time. It's now or never." Marcus was still for a moment, and Sophia could feel him thinking, weighing everything. Then he squeezed her hand once, hard and final, stronger than he ever had before. It was time. Marcus was going to wake up. The next morning, St. Mary's Hospital witnessed a miracle nobody dared to believe. Marcus opened his eyes. Dr. Raymond Cole was the first one called when the morning nurse noticed the patient responding. He rushed into the hospital room with a face caught between astonishment and disbelief, then stopped short when he saw Marcus looking at him, eyes open and aware. "Dear God," Dr. Cole breathed as he began his examination. "This is an extraordinary recovery. It goes against every prediction." He shone a light into Marcus's eyes, checked his reflexes, asked simple questions to assess brain function. Marcus answered slowly, his voice rough after so many days of disuse, but coherent, conscious. The news spread like wildfire. Marcus had woken up. Phones rang all over Chicago, from Ryan's office to the darkest corners of the criminal world. The most powerful gang leader in the city had come back from the dead, and Elena raced to the hospital the moment she heard. She arrived in an elegant black dress, hair smoothed into place, makeup flawless even though she claimed she'd been crying all night. She burst into the hospital room, eyes red and shining with tears, her whole body trembling like a wife hauled back from hell. "Oh God, Marcus," Elena sobbed as she rushed to her husband's bedside. "You're back. I prayed every day. Every hour, every minute. I never lost hope. I knew you'd come back to me." She wrapped her arms around Marcus, gripping him as if he might vanish. Her choked sobs filled the room, her shoulders shaking in the embrace of the husband who'd just returned from coma. It was the most perfect performance Elena had ever delivered. Dr. Cole and the nurses standing nearby were moved by the tear-soaked reunion. Everyone thought they were witnessing a love story that had survived catastrophe, a faithful wife finally getting her husband back. Then Marcus looked at Elena, and his eyes were completely empty. Who are you?" Marcus asked, his voice weak. Confused, Elena went rigid in his arms. Slowly, she lifted her head, staring into her husband's eyes in disbelief. "What, Marcus, it's me, Elena, your wife." Marcus shook his head, his face twisted with pain and confusion. I don't remember. You're saying you're my wife. I'm sorry. I don't remember anything." Elena stepped back, her face going pale. "You don't remember me? 10 years together, and you don't remember anything?" Marcus stared at her with hollow eyes, as if she were a complete stranger. 10 years, I don't know, I can't remember. Who am I? Why am I here?" Dr. Cole stepped in, placing a hand on Elena's shoulder in a gesture of comfort. "Mrs. Smith, please stay calm. This could be a result of the head trauma. I'll have Dr. Reed come examine him right away." Nathan Reed arrived 10 minutes later. Grave and professional, he ran a series of brain tests, shining a light into Marcus's eyes, asking questions about memory, identity, the past. Marcus answered with the fear and confusion of a man who'd lost himself, amnesia. Nathan announced when he finished, his voice calm and clinical, though Sophia caught the brief flicker of relief in his gray eyes. "It's common after severe traumatic brain injury. The patient may recover memories gradually over time, or he may never remember at all." Elena stood beside the bed, her expression shocked and devastated. But inside, she was almost screaming with relief. Marcus remembered nothing, not her whispers at his bedside, not what she'd said to Nathan. No memory meant no evidence. She and Nathan were safe. The plan might have to change. But she could still get what she wanted. A husband with amnesia was even easier to control than a husband in a coma. "I'll stay with you," Elena said, clasping Marcus's hand with practiced grief. "I'll help you remember everything. We'll rebuild from the beginning." Marcus looked at her, his eyes still empty, distant. "Thank you, I need time." Elena nodded, wiped her tears, and stepped out of the room to speak with Nathan in private. She didn't know that behind those hollow eyes, Marcus remembered everything, every poisonous whisper at his bedside, every plot discussed between Elena and Nathan, every detail of the deal with Victor Santos. He remembered it all, and he was acting better than anyone in the room. As Elena turned away and walked out, Marcus glanced toward the corner where Sophia stood in her nurse's uniform. Trying to look ordinary, like any other day, their eyes met for a brief moment, and the corner of Marcus's mouth lifted. A flicker of a smile, so fast only Sophia saw it. She understood at once. Marcus didn't have amnesia. He was playing a game of chess, and the people who thought they were winning were walking straight into a trap they couldn't even see. In the days that followed, Marcus kept playing the part of a man with amnesia perfectly. He looked at Elena with unfamiliar eyes every time she visited, asked innocent questions about their life, about his work, about the people around him. He pretended to be tired when she stayed too long. Pretended to have a headache when she pressed him with too many questions, and Elena believed him completely. She grew more comfortable than ever, convinced every secret had been buried along with Marcus's memory. She kept in contact with Victor Santos, talking through a new plan. Now that Marcus was awake but didn't remember, they needed to change strategy. Maybe they didn't have to kill him anymore. Maybe they only needed to control him, like a puppet. She took calls right in her car in the hospital parking lot, never realizing every conversation was being recorded. Ryan and Harold Bennett worked day and night to complete the evidence file. A listening device installed in Elena's car captured every conversation between her and Victor. Every scheme laid out openly because they thought they were safe. Harold gathered the transfer records tied to Elena's secret account, the hidden contracts linked to Victor's fake company, and the digital agreement he'd managed to decrypt. Sophia provided the full medication chart showing Nathan Reed's abnormal midazolam increases, along with blood tests proving the drug level in Marcus's body was far lower than the prescribed dose. Evidence that someone had intervened to save him. Ryan even found a witness from inside Victor Santos's organization, a disgruntled man willing to confirm the deal between Victor and Elena in exchange for protection. Nobody knew exactly how Ryan convinced him, but the result was a signed statement laying out the entire plot in detail. The night before the confrontation, Sophia stayed late in Marcus's room. The hospital had gone quiet, leaving only the steady hum of machines and the dim light from the hallway slipping through the crack of the door. Marcus could speak normally now, though his voice was still a little weak. He didn't have to pretend with her. The only person besides Ryan who knew the truth. Sophia, Marcus said, his voice low, serious. She turned to him. Blue eyes wide in the muted light, Marcus took her hand, his grip warmer, stronger than it had been in those first days. You risked your life for me, a complete stranger. Why? Sophia was quiet for a moment, looking down at the hand holding hers. She'd asked herself that question again and again through sleepless nights, and she still wasn't sure she had a perfect answer. Because nobody risked their life for my family, she said at last, her voice soft as breath. When my house was burned, when my parents and my brother died, nobody stood up to protect them. Nobody cared. I can't change the past. But I can change what happens now. Marcus watched her for a long time, his eyes filled with emotions Sophia couldn't quite read. What do you want from this? Money? Protection? I can give you anything you want. Sophia shook her head, a brief, sad smile touching her mouth. I don't want your money. I don't need protection. She paused, held his gaze. I only want you to promise me one thing. What? Promise me you'll choose justice, not revenge. Sophia said, her tone steady, sincere. I know who you are. I know you've got the power to do anything you want to the people who betrayed you. But promise me you'll be better than them. Promise me you won't become the thing they think you are. Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked at Sophia, the slender nurse with sad blue eyes, the woman who'd risked everything to save him and asked for nothing in return. In his world where everything had a price, where loyalty was bought and betrayal was ordinary, Sophia's unconditional kindness was more valuable than any treasure. I promise, Marcus said at last, his voice deep, certain. Sophia looked at him and knew he meant it. This wasn't the empty promise of a gang boss. It was the promise of a man who wanted to change, who wanted to be worthy of the trust she'd placed in him. For the first time in years, Marcus wanted to become a better man, not out of fear, not out of profit, but because a stranger had seen the human being inside him and believed he deserved to be saved. The next morning, Marcus called for a family meeting in his hospital room. He told the nurse he wanted to see the people he loved, to thank them for staying by him through the hardest stretch of his life. It sounded simple, moving even, a man who'd slipped past death's blade, asking for nothing but a chance to speak. Nobody suspected a thing. Elena arrived first, beautiful and radiant in a cream-white dress, her blonde hair smoothed into a glossy sweep. She entered with the gentle smile of a devoted wife. Utterly confident she still held the reins. Marcus remembered nothing. Nathan had confirmed it, and all she had to do was keep playing the perfect wife until she found a way to control his assets completely. Ryan and Harold Bennett came in right after, both faces serious, unreadable. Sophia stood in the corner in her nurse's uniform, pretending to check the medical equipment as part of her routine work. Alina didn't notice her. To Alina, Sophia was just an anonymous nurse. "Not worth a thought. How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Alina asked as she sat by the bed, taking Marcus's hand with practiced tenderness. "Don't push yourself. You still need rest." Marcus looked at her, his eyes still hollow and unfamiliar. Just as they'd been for days. "Thank you, I want to say a few words." He paused, his voice weak. Trembling, "I want to thank all of you for being here with me through this. I know I don't remember much, but I know you care about me." Alina smiled, tightening her hold on his hand. Victory was within reach. Marcus trusted her completely, depended on her completely. She only had to keep this performance going a little longer, and everything would be hers. Then Marcus lifted his head, and everything changed. The emptiness vanished from his eyes, as if it had never been there. In its place was a gaze sharp as a blade, the gaze of the most powerful gang leader in Chicago, the gaze of a man who'd seen hell and made it back alive. "I remember everything, Alina," Marcus said, and his voice changed with it. No more weakness, no more tremor, only power and a threat that filled the room. "Every word, every whisper, every plan to put me in the ground." Alina froze, her face turning white as paper. "Marcus, you're confused. Head trauma can make you. When I stop breathing, you'll dance on my grave." Marcus cut in, repeating the exact words she'd whispered at his bedside on the first night, word for word. "That's what you said." All color drained from Alina's face. She sprang to her feet, looking around like an animal cornered, her eyes sweeping over Ryan, over Harold, over Sophia, searching for an escape, an ally, anything that might save her. "There was nothing, Harold," Marcus said, never taking his eyes off his wife. Harold Bennett stepped forward, set a leather briefcase on the table, and opened it. Inside were thick files, photographs, audio discs. "Conspiracy to commit murder." Harold read aloud, his voice calm and professional, like an indictment being presented in court. "Fraud, embezzlement. These are recordings of calls between you and Victor Santos, discussing how to divide Mr. Smith's assets after his death. These are transfer records from Victor's fake company into your secret Swiss account. This is evidence showing Dr. Nathan Reid deliberately increased sedative doses to prevent Mr. Smith from recovering. And this is a signed statement from a witness inside Victor Santos's organization, confirming the entire arrangement." Alina stared at the evidence stacked in front of her and understood she'd lost completely, irrevocably. She spun and lunged for the door, but Ryan was already there, blocking the exit. His eyes were ice, filled with hatred. 10 years, Marcus said, his voice dropping, heavy with pain and fury. "I gave you 10 years. I gave you everything you wanted. I gave you a life anyone would have dreamed of. And this is how you repay me." Alina turned back to her husband, and for the first time in 10 years she stopped acting. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Real tears at last, not from remorse, but from rage and desperation. "You never loved me," she screamed, bitterness shredding her voice. "I was just another thing in your collection, a trophy to display, a perfect picture for your perfect life. Did you ever see me as a human being? Did you ever care what I wanted, what I felt?" She collapsed into a chair, her body shaking with choking sobs. "I hate you. I hate the shadow I've had to live in for 10 years. I hate that I'm nothing but Marcus's wife." Marcus looked at the woman breaking in front of him and felt a deep, unexpected pain. Maybe she was right. Maybe he'd never truly seen her. Maybe he'd treated her like part of his empire instead of a partner. But none of that excused what she'd done. "Maybe you're right," Marcus said, his voice cold now, but no longer burning with hatred. "Maybe I didn't love you the way you wanted to be loved, but I never tried to kill you." After the confrontation in the hospital room, Chicago's criminal world held its breath and waited. Everyone knew Marcus would take revenge, and by the law of that world, revenge was supposed to be paid in blood. Elena had plotted to kill her husband. Victor Santos had tried to seize his territory. Nathan Red had poisoned him. By the usual logic, all three should die, and their deaths would be a warning to anyone reckless enough to imagine betraying Marcus. That night, Ryan met his brother alone in the hospital room. "What do you want me to do with her, and with Victor?" Ryan asked, his voice cold, ready. He'd prepared everything, only waiting for one order from Marcus for the matter to be handled the way the criminal world always handled it. Marcus stayed silent for a long time, looking out the window where Chicago's lights flickered in the dark. Then he said something nobody expected. "Let her go." Ryan went still. "What? You can't be serious. She tried to kill you." "I know," Marcus answered, calm. "Give her a choice, a quiet divorce, a small amount of money, enough to start over. And she leaves Chicago for good and never shows her face again, if she refuses, or if she breaks the terms. Then you can do whatever you want." When Elena was brought before Marcus one last time, she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You're letting me go?" she asked, her voice shaking with disbelief at her own luck. Marcus looked at her, his eyes no longer burning with hatred, only exhaustion and something that looked almost like sadness. "Revenge would make me no different than you, and I promised someone I'd be better than that." Elena followed his gaze and saw Sophia standing in the corner of the room. In that instant, she understood everything. The small, invisible nurse she'd never bothered to notice had saved her husband's life and changed him, but it was too late for jealousy, too late for regret. Elena left Chicago the next day with a small suitcase and whatever was left of her life. Nobody knew where she went, and nobody cared. Nathan Red wasn't so lucky. The evidence that he deliberately poisoned a patient was sent to the medical board and the police. He lost his license and faced years in prison for intentional harm and conspiracy to commit murder. The career he'd spent his life building collapsed overnight, and the name Nathan Red became a symbol of corruption in medicine. As for Victor Santos, he was handled in the way the criminal world handled its own. Nobody knew exactly what happened, and nobody asked. They only knew that after that night, the name Victor Santos stopped appearing in any conversation in Chicago's criminal world. 3 months later, Marcus returned home and began a new life. He wasn't the same man he'd been before, the man who only knew power and control. The weeks he'd spent motionless in a hospital bed, listening to whispers in the dark, had changed him in ways nobody expected. He founded a charity in Tommy's name, Sophia's younger brother, dedicated to helping victims of violence and loan sharking, families like Sophia's, people driven to the edge by ruthless men. Now had a place to turn for help. Marcus asked Sophia to run the foundation. At first, she refused, unwilling to accept anything from him in return for what she'd done. "I didn't save you to be repaid," Sophia said. "I know," Marcus answered. "You saved me when you had nothing to gain. This isn't charity. It's a chance for you to save other people the way you saved me. And I can't think of anyone better than you to do it." Sophia finally accepted. On a Chicago night 3 months after everything that had happened, Marcus and Sophia stood on the penthouse balcony. Looking down at the city, the lights glittered below like millions of stars fallen to earth, and the cold autumn air carried the scent of new beginnings. They stood side by side, not touching, but the space between them had changed, no longer nurse and patient, no longer savior and saved. They were two people who'd seen each other in their weakest moments, and still chose to stay. "Do you know what I learned lying in that hospital bed? Unable to move, unable to speak?" Marcus asked, his eyes still on the city. "What?" Sophia asked. Marcus turned to her, and his eyes softened in a way she'd never seen before. "The way people treat you when you can't give them anything tells you everything you need to know about them." Sophia looked at him, waiting. "And what did you learn about me?" she asked quietly. Marcus smiled for the first time. A real smile, not the smile of a powerful gang leader, but the smile of a man who'd found his faith in people again. That there are people worth trusting, even when you've forgotten how to trust for a long time. They stood there in silence, watching Chicago's lights shimmer below. Nothing else needed to be said. Sometimes the deepest feelings don't need words, and the strongest bonds are formed when all we have left is trust. Marcus and Sophia's story reminds us of something important about life. When we lose all power and status, when we're vulnerable and can't protect ourselves, that's when the true nature of the people around us is revealed. Elena, the wife of 10 years, chose betrayal when she believed her husband no longer had value. Sophia, a complete stranger, chose to risk her life to save someone she didn't even know. The lesson here isn't only about betrayal or loyalty, it's also about choice. Marcus chose justice instead of revenge, forgiveness instead of killing. He chose to become a better man, not because he was weak, but because he was strong enough to rise above hatred. And Sophia chose to do what was right even when it meant danger, because she understood that silence in the face of evil is a form of complicity. In life, we always have choices, to choose love or hatred, forgiveness or revenge, to stand up or bow down. Those choices define who we are, more than any circumstance or fate ever could. 2 years passed like a quiet river flowing through Chicago. Marcus's life had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. The man who once ruled the criminal world with an iron fist now spent his mornings at the charity foundation, the one named after Tommy, Sophia's little brother, who never got the chance to become a doctor. Every day, families came through those doors. Families running from loan sharks, families crushed by violence, families with nowhere else to turn. And Marcus helped them, not because he wanted power, not because he wanted gratitude, but because he remembered what it felt like to be powerless. Trapped in his own body, unable to move, unable to speak, completely at the mercy of the people around him. That memory changed everything. Sophia ran the foundation with quiet dedication. She'd found her purpose again, helping people the way she couldn't help her own family. Every person they saved felt like a small redemption for Tommy, for her parents, for everyone she'd lost, and slowly, without either of them really noticing, something grew between Marcus and Sophia. Not the dramatic romance from movies, but something deeper, quieter, more real. It was in the way Marcus looked at her when she talked to families who'd lost everything. The gentle compassion in her voice, the way she never gave up on anyone. It was in the way Sophia smiled when Marcus spent hours talking to kids from the neighborhood, teaching them that strength wasn't about violence, that real power came from protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. One evening, they were closing the foundation for the day. The last family had just left, a mother with 2 kids. Finally free from the loan sharks who'd been threatening them, Marcus locked the door and turned to find Sophia standing by the window, looking out at Chicago's lights beginning to flicker on as darkness fell. "You're thinking about Tommy again," Marcus said softly. It wasn't a question. He'd learned to read her silences. Sophia nodded, not turning around. Today would have been his birthday, 23, she paused. He'd be finishing medical school right about now. Marcus walked over and stood beside her. "He would have been proud of you, what you've built here." Sophia finally looked at him, her blue eyes glistening. "What we've built," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." Marcus shook his head. "You saved my life, Sophia. This is nothing compared to that. I didn't save your life so you'd owe me." Sophia said, her voice firm but gentle, "I saved your life because it was the right thing to do." Marcus smiled. That same real smile that only appeared when he was with her. "I know, and that's exactly why I'm doing this. Not because I owe you, but because you showed me there was a better way to live." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. Then Marcus spoke again, his voice quieter. "My lawyer called today." Sophia turned to him. "Curious, the divorce is finalized. It's official. Elena's gone. How do you feel?" Sophia asked carefully. Marcus thought for a moment. "Free," he said simply. "For the first time in 10 years, I feel free." He looked at Sophia. "She took everything I gave her, the house, the money I promised, the fresh start, And in return, I got something more valuable than all of it. What's that? The truth, Marcus said, about who people really are, about what matters. He paused, and the chance to become someone better. Sophia smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. You already are someone better, Marcus. You just needed to see it. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. Ryan, Marcus answered. What's wrong? Ryan's voice came through, tense and urgent. We've got a problem. Victor Santos's old crew. They're making moves again, testing our boundaries, trying to see if you've gone soft. Marcus's jaw tightened. The old instincts kicked in, the survival mode that had kept him alive for so many years in the criminal world. Handle it, Marcus said, his voice turning cold, the voice of the man he used to be. But then he caught Sophia watching him. Those blue eyes, sad but steady, believing in him, trusting him to be better. Marcus took a deep breath. Wait, he said into the phone. Handle it, but no violence, no threats. Just make it clear we're not interested in war. If they want to talk, we'll talk. If they want to fight, we'll defend. But we're not starting anything. Silence on the other end, Ryan clearly surprised. You sure about this? Ryan asked. Marcus looked at Sophia. Yeah, I'm sure. We're not those people anymore. He hung up. Sophia didn't say anything, but the small smile on her face told Marcus everything. He'd made the right choice. That night, Marcus drove Sophia home. Her tiny studio apartment in a neighborhood that used to be dangerous but was slowly getting better. Partly because of the work they'd been doing at the foundation, he walked her to her door, like he always did. Making sure she got home safe, Sophia unlocked the door, then turned back to him. Marcus, she said. Her voice soft, yeah, thank you for everything. For listening to me that first night when you couldn't even respond. For fighting to survive, for choosing to be better. She paused. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Marcus asked gently. Hope, Sophia whispered. Hope that good people still exist, that doing the right thing still matters. That we can make a difference even when the world feels dark. Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest. A feeling he hadn't felt in years. Maybe never. You gave me the same thing, he said quietly. When nobody else cared if I lived or died, you cared. You risked everything for a stranger, that kind of goodness. I'd forgotten it existed. They stood there in the hallway, neither wanting to break the moment. Then Sophia did something she'd never done before. She stepped forward and hugged Marcus. Not a formal hug, not a polite hug, but a real embrace, full of warmth and trust and something deeper neither of them was ready to name yet. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, holding this slender woman who'd saved his life, changed his life. Made him want to be worthy of the second chance he'd been given. When they finally pulled apart, both of them had tears in their eyes. Good night, Marcus, Sophia whispered. Good night, Sophia. Marcus walked back to his car. But before he drove away, he looked up at Sophia's window. She was standing there, silhouetted against the light, and she waved. A simple gesture, but it meant everything. Marcus waved back, and for the first time since the accident, since the betrayal, since everything that had happened, Marcus felt truly happy, not the temporary satisfaction of power or money or control, but the deep, quiet happiness of knowing he was becoming the person he was meant to be, and knowing that the person who'd saved his life was still there, still believing in him, still walking beside him. As Marcus drove through Chicago's streets that night, he thought about how strange life was, how the worst moments could lead to the best changes, how losing everything could teach you what really mattered, how the person you least expected could become the person you couldn't imagine living without, and how sometimes salvation came not from the people who'd known you the longest, but from a stranger willing to risk everything because she believed everyone deserved a chance to fight. Marcus smiled to himself in the darkness of the car. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid. Because he'd learned the most important lesson. Real strength wasn't about power or control. Real strength was about choosing kindness when cruelty was easier. Choosing forgiveness when revenge felt justified. Choosing to be better even when nobody expected it. And having someone beside you who believed you could, someone like Sophia, the nurse with sad blue eyes who'd seen a man worth saving when everyone else saw only a criminal, who'd risked her life for a stranger because she understood that silence in the face of evil made you part of the darkness, who'd asked for nothing in return except that he choose justice over revenge. Marcus had made that choice, and it had set him free in ways he never imagined. The city lights blurred past as he drove. Chicago. The city that had made him, broken him, and given him a second chance. And somewhere in those lights, in a tiny studio apartment, Sophia was probably making tea, probably thinking about Tommy and her parents, probably wondering if she'd done enough today to honor their memory. She always did, and tomorrow they'd do it again, together, helping people who needed it, making Chicago a little bit safer, a little bit kinder, one family at a time, because that's what heroes did. Not the heroes from movies with superpowers and capes, but real heroes, ordinary people who made extraordinary choices, people like Sophia, who risked everything for what was right, and people like Marcus, who chose to change even when change was terrifying. The road stretched ahead, dark but full of possibility, and Marcus drove forward, not running from his past, but moving toward something better. A future where the most powerful man in Chicago used his power to protect instead of control, where a lonely nurse found family again in the people she helped, where two broken people found healing in choosing goodness over darkness. The story of Marcus and Sophia wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time it would be written not in blood and betrayal, but in kindness, courage, and the quiet strength of two people who refused to let the darkness win.